Hello and welcome to the Safety Net. I'm Steve Bressler, along with Dr. Lloyd Gelano, the Human Relations and Human Services Administrator for the town of Brookline. Also joining us today are Danielle Piccarini, Assistant District Attorney with the Norfolk DA Michael Morrissey's office, and a specialist dealing with sexual assault in the Special Victims Unit, just like on TV. And sitting next to her is Erica Marathas, Victim Witness Advocate, also with the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office. And then we have Jessica Tepero, who's the Regional Director, well actually the Director of Prevention Programs at REACH, a private nonprofit based in Waltham, I believe, that provides safety and support to survivors of abuse across Massachusetts. Right? Welcome to all of you. Thank you for being on the show. Before we go into the show, into our topic today, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do at your office? Let's start with you, Danielle.
Sure. I've been with the DA's office for about 9 years now, and I prosecute mainly sexual assault cases, which could be children, adults, definitely college students. I do have some domestic violence cases as well, which do not have a sexual aspect to them, but our unit is the Special Victims Unit, so we deal with children of all ages, adults of all ages, and elders as well.
Okay.
And I'm Erica. I am an advocate that works in the Special Victims Unit. My job is to provide support to victims and witnesses throughout the criminal process. We also work to ensure that there's safety planning with those victims and witnesses, and also that they feel safe where they are, and also that their legal rights are respected throughout the criminal process.
Well, victim witness advocate's always very important.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah. Jessica.
I'm Jessica Tepero. I'm the Director of Prevention Programs for REACH Beyond Domestic Violence. REACH is a nonprofit that's based in Waltham and serves 27 cities and towns in the Metro West and Metro North area, including Brookline and Newton and Watertown and all the surrounding areas. And so I run our prevention programs, which really focuses on empowering community members, empowering young people to learn about intimate partner violence and be able to recognize it, be able to know what to do or what to say if they or someone they know is going through a domestic violence relationship, where to get support, and also how they can intervene and prevent these situations from happening.
That's super. We've had folks from REACH on many times over the years, and we're happy to have you
Happy
also.
to be here.
Today's program is about sexual assault on college campuses, and given that this show is taking place in early September, when college is just starting, that's a most pertinent topic. In particular, I'm sure that many parents who are sending their daughters off to college for the first time especially have thought about their safety, and I guess that there might be some sons who may also be victims of sexual assault, so we're going to discuss that also. Earlier this year, President Obama signed a presidential memorandum establishing a White House task force to protect students from sexual assault, and that task force released its first report just 4 months later in April. And Vice President Biden said that freedom from sexual assault is a basic human right. The report says that 1 in 5 women is sexually assaulted in college, often by someone she knows. So we have a lot of questions to ask.
The first one off the bat, as Steve mentioned, it is the beginning of the school year, and our student orientation is a part of that process. I'm just curious, what kind of information about sexual assault is provided to the students at this time?
It really varies. I think with the new legislation and laws in place that you mentioned, Steve, a lot more schools are getting on board and being more thoughtful about how to provide this information in a way that is really going to be effective, especially in the beginning of someone's college career. Unfortunately, we know the first 15 weeks is when the most sexual assaults occur for someone who's just entering into college, and it's one of the #1 reasons that college students drop out or transfer from universities. And so it is incredibly important that universities address this issue right from the beginning. Prior to coming to REACH, I had worked with colleges and universities in Washington, D.C., Boston, and California, and there's not really a standard of how schools address sexual assault or intimate partner violence, and that goes for orientation as well. I've seen some schools who do a really fabulous job of having an entire presentation, often student-led or student-informed, on this topic. And I've also seen other schools give out a pamphlet, and that's basically it. And so I think part of it is, while laws and legislation are really important, there has to be some sort of standardization that holds colleges and universities to a higher standard that, I can say if I just handed out a pamphlet or if we made one announcement, that's enough. And it isn't enough. There really has to be ongoing education. There has to be ongoing communication around this issue. And I think while it is important for it to happen to everybody, and so sometimes the easiest thing to do is to think about some of the orientation events that bring all students together in these big assembly halls, that's oftentimes not the most effective means of communication. And so a lot of the work that I did was training RAs who could then lead events with their residents in these smaller, more intimate settings where they're able to get into much more in-depth conversation and partner with local nonprofits to bring them in to provide this education. So while I do think a lot of colleges and universities are taking the lead and understanding that they need to address this, I think a lot of them are still trying to figure out what the best approach for their university is. Going to a Big Ten school is very different than going to a private school that only has a few hundred students, and so each university's needs are going to be a little bit different.
How widespread is this? I mean, it's the numbers that were quoted in the report said 1 in 5 women. Are we talking about hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands across the country?
I think it's difficult to know too, because we don't know what is not reported.
Right.
But I think it's also important to focus, like Jessica was saying, with the when students come into school for the first time, that the focus isn't just on females as potential victims, but also male as potential victims, men, and that also heterosexual and homosexual relationships, that anyone can be victimized by anyone. There is no cookie cutter suspect, and there's no cookie cutter victim. So I think that needs to be addressed, as well as alcohol and drug facilitated rapes. Oftentimes the term date rape is used as well, and that seems to give a connotation of a relationship, but I think it just needs to be, a rape is just an offense against someone without their consent, and go from there, regardless of gender, age, any of those types of factors.
Erica, as victim witness advocate, what percentage of your caseload, if you recollect, would be college students?
It's hard to say. I'm new to the Special Victims Unit, probably I started about 4 months ago. Before that, I did domestic violence cases. I would say that there's certainly more than I expected. I think it also depends too where the colleges are located, in which towns the advocates cover. Obviously, there are towns that have colleges and towns that don't have colleges. So naturally, I would say that the towns with colleges have a number of sexual assaults surrounding the college, in the college environment. I also think it's safe to say too that though we've come a long way, I think we have a long way to go in terms of addressing the issue, even in the courts, within the college, but even the courts as well.
I think a lot of people think of college sexual assaults in a different connotation for some reason, because they're just college kids and they're just, acting out maybe, or a lot of people might just say, oh, they were just drinking. But I think people really need to just take it out of a college context. This wouldn't be okay if this happened at a restaurant or anywhere else. And I think we need to change that perception, that for some reason, because it happened at college, maybe it's not a big of a deal, as if it happened anywhere else or to someone of a different age. I think.
Well, I agree. It is a big deal,
Yes.
regardless. And my wife, as I was prepping for the show today, I was talking to my wife, and she told me that when she was a college student, she was grabbed. She went to Northeastern, and she was grabbed. She was walking down one of the halls, and there weren't any other people there. And and she said I was wearing some boots, and I kicked them, and thank God. And
I'm willing to say
down.
I think that the numbers are not telling. 1 out of 5. I'm going to probably say that almost like 95% of women somehow have been sexually harassed at
Right.
school in some way.
Absolutely.
Really?
Oh,
Well,
yeah,
and when we think
yeah.
of it in terms of sexual assault and how broad that term can be, if we really think about all the experiences of harassment, of being looked at in a way that makes you feel uncomfortable, of having comments made to you that make you uncomfortable and feel unsafe, when you think about, the range of experiences that people have in which they're pressured or forced to do something that they didn't want to do, the statistics are very high. And I think part of it is that a lot of people hear about rape in a very specific context. They hear about it through Law and Order, they hear about it through the news, and those usually depict situations that are very violent, that happen in certain contexts. And so a lot of survivors think of themselves and they think, well, maybe what happened to me wasn't so bad. And they struggle with the shame and the embarrassment and the silence around this issue. And so this issue has always existed. And we have varying statistics nationally for people in their lifetime. We hear 1 in 3 women experience some form of sexual violence in their lifetime, and the highest rate is between the ages of 16 and 24, which of course includes the college years. And we also know that for men, it's about 1 in 6 who experience sexual assault, and for many of them, it happens early in life. And unfortunately, for both men and women, experiencing it early in life makes you, unfortunately, more likely to experience it again later in life. And so that has long-term repercussions for folks. But as Danielle was saying earlier, it's one of the most underreported crimes because of all the silence, because of all the shame, definitely for women, and I think especially for men. We don't hear about that very often. And so a lot of these experiences are experiences in which people knew one another. And the closer the relationship prior to the assault, the less likely they are to report it, for a lot of different reasons. And so what we do hear more about from a legal perspective is going to be situations where they didn't know each other as well, but that doesn't mean that that's the full story. And so I think that's a really important component is how do we know what we don't know? How do we know what isn't reported? And when I was working with colleges and universities, 10 years ago when this wasn't being as widely addressed in the federal level as it is now, if you looked at most colleges and universities reporting, if you looked to see how many sexual assaults occurred, you saw zeros. I saw zeros at my university at the time that we were trying to do a lot of education and awareness. And at that time, the only education and prevention that was done was to tell young women as they came in as incoming freshmen, make sure you watch your drink at fraternity parties. And that was it. And so what I remember meeting with one of the public safety officers at my university and him telling me that if we were effective in getting awareness spread and making sure people knew where to go, because I think that's the other piece is that a lot of folks don't know what resources are available to them, that the numbers would go up. And I think a lot of universities struggle with that because if it was always zero and suddenly people are reporting, then it looks like, oh my gosh, we have, suddenly it's tripled or it's magnified, this issue. And I think there's real concern that parents wouldn't want their children to go to a university that says they had 200 sexual assaults if another university says that they had 0.
Sure.
But,
Okay,
yeah.
so let's say I'm a parent and I've got a young son or daughter who's gone to school and been protected, and now for the first time in his or her life, he or she is going away to school. What do I as a parent tell my son or daughter in order to get him or her protected, to give him information that he or she can use while away from home?
It's difficult. You don't want to scare your child, but you want them to be prepared.
And I think part of it too is not only just wanting to protect them, but your child could potentially protect someone
Exactly,
else.
yep.
And being aware at college parties where obviously there is drinking going on, and being aware of if you see another girl or another guy who's maybe had too much to drink, watch that person and make sure that person's okay. Because I think, again, that stereotype on college campuses, or that feeling like it's okay, it's just college, they just drank too much, should not be a fact. People shouldn't feel that way.
How common, how prevalent is the use of date rape drugs or? spiked drinks or whatever?
Well, alcohol is the #1 date rape drug. I think that's
Okay.
the most. I think when we hear date rape drug, we think, you know, an actual pill or something that was put into someone else's drink. But alcohol is most commonly used to subdue someone with the purpose of sexually assaulting them. And I think it's very common. I mean, the statistics of what's reported are very high. But I also want to really make it clear that that's not necessarily the entire story. And alcohol does not cause someone to sexual assault somebody else. And I think sometimes that gets very confused and kind of muddled together. And so while yes, it does absolutely happen with the presence of alcohol, it also happens in the context of an intimate relationship where someone trusts someone else and someone says to them, well, if you really loved me, then you would. And those are the types of things that very rarely get reported, and if they do, it's reported much later after the fact. And so I think the focus has been more on sexual assaults, including alcohol, because I think those are the stories that we're hearing more about, and they absolutely do happen. And I think that conversation is so incredibly important, but it also leaves out another part of the story that's also very important.
I think it's important. A lot of people think of rape and sexual assault as a very violent offense, that they have to be physically held down, maybe abused in some type of physical way, hit and punched. But sexual assault and rape occurs in so many different types of contexts. And as far as alcohol, there's no special number. It's not like drunk driving, you know, where there's a legal limit. But there comes a point where a person cannot legally consent to any type of sexual contact. And again, there's no magic number, so it's not like if she's a 0.08 or he's a 0.08, then that person can't consent. But there definitely comes a point where legally you can't consent. And then you don't need that type of force that people often think about. So I feel like a lot of people may wake up the next morning and say, oh my gosh, what happened last night? Oh, I never should have drank that much. But that shouldn't be the first thought that comes to someone's mind. The first thought should be, I drank too much and he attacked me or she attacked me or raped me, and then where to go from there. I think it's important too that people should know that if they decide to report something to the police department, it doesn't necessarily mean that they have to go forward with a criminal prosecution. It's good for police departments to know if things have happened. And you know, every police department is different, so I can't speak to every department, but we often have cases where people come forward and want to report things, but decide for whatever reason, there are so many reasons, that they don't want to go through the criminal justice system.
Now, doesn't the Presidential Task Force direct colleges and universities to establish offices to deal with this type of problem?
I believe it does, and I think it's important that the schools maintain contact with the police departments, because I do believe there are times when cases are not reported to the police departments. And every victim and survivor has a different personal view. There's no cookie cutter victim or survivor out there. But I think it's important that if someone does want to go forward with criminal charges, it's important that they reach out to the police department as well.
Yeah, a lot of it needs to be up to the victim survivor, because from the context of thinking about what they went through, someone took control away from them. And so I think part of the fear of what will happen if I tell somebody, because the fear is, will I have control taken away from me again? And so the universities that I've seen that have a higher reporting rate, which is a good thing, are the ones that really make it clear that they care about the students and they care about the safety of all students. So they need to take some necessary steps to make sure all students are safe, because, you know, if something happened and that student is still at that university, are they going to be victimizing other students? And that said, they also really care about the survivor having a say and a choice in the process. And so that's where partnerships with nonprofits are really important, because being able to work with a sexual assault counselor or a domestic violence advocate that has confidentiality allows somebody to talk through their options and figure out what they want to do. And very often when we're given that opportunity to talk it through first, and we have a choice, we're more likely to report. It's when something feels like we don't have a choice, again, right after having choice taken away, that very often we get kind of stuck and feel like, well, then I don't want to deal with it at all. And so I think that emotional support is incredibly important for that person's ongoing well-being and for them to feel like they're able to make the choice that's best for them in that moment. A lot of times people look back on experiences and wish that they had told somebody or wish that they had taken steps through the legal system or through the college system as it was set up. But a lot of colleges, I think, again, need to kind of look at what their protocols are if somebody does come forward and that they're transparent with that person of what they need to do if they disclose and right from the beginning. I think the other piece that's really hard about this is that I think part of why the first 15 weeks are such a crucial time for college freshmen is it is the partying and the freedom that happens that all of a sudden you're on your own. But there's also this really amazing thing about those first few weeks when you don't know anybody and nobody else knows anybody, and you meet your roommate or you meet your teammates or you meet the people on your floor and you feel this instant connection with them. And how often do we hear people say, I felt like I've never met anybody like you before, and but they've only known each other for 24 hours or however long it is. And so for some young people who are, growing up in the same town and they've always known each other as friends, if they were at a party together, they would know that person's acting strange, something's wrong, or they've been drinking too much. But when you're just meeting people, it can be really scary to feel like I can step up and say something or I can intervene. And so that's where I think really providing young people in high school with tools that they can use in college is so important. And really thinking through together, not necessarily telling your child or telling students, here's what you have to do, but here's what would you do, right, in this situation. And a lot of it is, exactly as Danielle was saying, just feeling like responsibility for one another as humans, whether I know this person really well or not. That if I see someone, leaving with someone else, that I'll text them because we all have our cell phones on us. And if they don't respond, maybe I'll call them or maybe I'll grab a friend and we'll walk after them and just make sure they're okay. Because so often afterwards, people will say, I wish I had done something. I went to that party with someone and I really wish I had known or I had done something more. And so rather than say, I wish I had, sometimes that leads to an awkward moment, especially with someone you don't know very well. But I'd rather have that awkward moment and feel like I did all I could than to feel like something really terrible happened and I feel like I could have prevented
Well, do you
it.
recollect whether Brookline High School has a program to orient kids going off to college?
I don't know offhand, but I know the Domestic Roundtable is actually looking into making sure these programs do exist.
There
in
is a
Brooklyn.
peer leadership program at Brookline High School.
Right,
Yeah.
and they actually do this, but it's not enough. We need to be more more vocal and actually make it more visible in the town as well. I am actually curious about the perpetrators, whether or not it's been substantiated or not. What is sort of the process for them if they're found not guilty or the school doesn't see this as being something that happened? What's the next step for them? Is it gone, or do they have to go through some kind of program, or is the school educated in some way?
Well, the criminal justice system, once someone is found not guilty, that's it. There is nothing more for that person. And I think every school individually probably handles cases differently. Jessica, I don't know if you know more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it's really up to the school to think about, and how to get that message across. And I think, again, not stigmatizing certain groups. I've had really wonderful success working with athletes, working with fraternities, because those are leaders on campuses. And very often we look at them as potential perpetrators, but actually they are leaders, right? And if that leadership can be turned into, never standing by silently as you watch your friend take somebody off who seems too intoxicated or pressure somebody to do something, then that's a really powerful message. I think that socially, what tends to happen is that if somebody does come forward and say, I was sexually assaulted by this person, unfortunately, very often, the way that our culture is set up is that people tend to not believe that person. They tend to ask them, well, were you drinking too much, or what were you wearing, or did you lead them on? And very often, the perpetrator is perceived as the victim of, poor this person, they were accused of doing something and they're a nice person. Because that's part of what's so challenging about this is that they're not, typically they're not people that we would assume would do something bad, right? They're nice, charming, popular, whatever, and they're not lurking in the corner wearing a big sign that says, I will sexually assault you if you go to a party with me. And so that's really confusing for folks because, again, the way we see things in movies, there's like ominous music following them around. So we think that's what a perpetrator looks like. And in reality, the perpetrators are sitting next to us in class, or the perpetrators are sitting with us at lunch, or they're somebody that we know very well. And so it challenges us as friends, as bystanders, to know what to do and what to say. And so unfortunately, I have worked with some survivors who experienced sexual assault on campus, made the choice to go forward with the legal process or the process that the college had set up. And when that person was found not guilty or there was insufficient evidence, they were the ones that were ridiculed. They were the ones that were ostracized by their friends. And they were the one who had to see that person who took something so powerful away from them every day on campus.
And word must get around the campus very quickly.
It
when
depends
that
on the
sort of thing
campus, but
happens.
yeah, I definitely think that can happen.
And I think it's important too that even if a victim or survivor decides, I don't want to report this to campus police or the police department, that medical treatment is absolutely necessary. That a medical provider is there for a totally different reason than law enforcement and campus security. So I think that is of utmost importance that people remember. Even if I don't want to tell anybody about this, I should still be checked out medically.
So what would you recommend? Someone go to an area hospital, or should colleges and universities have clinics set up?
There are specially trained nurses that are called SANE nurses, which are sexual assault nurse examiners, and they're the ones who can perform rape kit exams.
On campus, or?
Typically not on campus,
Okay.
But they are at area hospitals, and that's again where the education is so important, that people know where to go, and also that they understand what a rape kit is. I can't tell you how many times people have told me, oh, that's when they collect evidence, or that's when, and it's so connected to the legal process that they think if I do that, I'm not gonna have choice whether or not I report. But really, the purpose of it, first and foremost, is that person's health and well-being. So especially in a situation where someone doesn't have memory of what happened, they don't know if protection was used, it is so important that they get medical attention right away. And the wonderful thing about it is that if evidence can be collected with the consent of the survivor, then they have the ability to decide down the road, if I want to report, then that evidence is there, but that evidence goes away very quickly. And so if they don't get medical attention very quickly, then unfortunately sometimes that evidence is no longer available to them.
I think it's important people know too that there are advocates that do work at the various courthouses. I can speak for Norfolk County, and we have 5 district courts. We also have a probate and family court, a superior court, and a juvenile court. And the way our office is structured, and I know many of the neighboring counties also have this put in place, where we have an advocate stationed at every courthouse who are there to speak to people, not necessarily about whether or not they want to report the incident or not, but to provide them with safety planning and resources and places that they can go to get some assistance and help.
And Norfolk County's been very good, and
Yes.
DA Morrissey has been excellent. He's been on the show before also. We have less than a minute left, and the half hour has gone by very, very quickly. Last word. Each of you, 10 seconds.
I think enjoy your college years, watch out for other people, and unfortunately you do have to watch out for yourself.
And I just want people to know that from an advocate point of view, we're here, and our main concern is your safety, and we are here with resources to help you.
Jessica?
I think for people to know that they're not alone, that unfortunately it is a really prevalent issue, and therefore there are a lot of resources and people out there who are there to support.
Super. Lloyd, do you have anything to add?
I just think that we still have a lot of work to do regarding helping people have an understanding what a healthy relationship is, and changing the culture, university and college culture of this type of behavior is not appropriate. There should never be a mindset to go out and abuse someone in any way.
Right.
Thank you all very
Thank
much.
you.
Thanks for
I
having
want to
us.
thank Lloyd and Erica and Danielle and Jessica for your comments and insight into this important issue. I want to thank the viewers for watching, and please join us next time on The Safety Net.